So let me ask you a question. What are the things that you have been told about how to relate to fears, worries, anxieties, and obsessions? And feel free to chime in. I would love to hear from you. What are the messages that you have received about how to handle the moments when you feel scared or you feel anxious? So I think someone mentioned here, sometimes we have been heard that only we people are afraid of things. You are anxious about nothing. You shouldn't be anxious. Stop being anxious. You shouldn't be afraid of anything. Don't be scared. That's a very popular one. Fear is in your head. Control your anxiety. Mind over fear. You should be able to control what you're feeling. Or what people tell you, just write it out. It's another popular message we have been told is get over it. So reality is that we have been socialized and exposed to all types of messages about fears. I honestly don't remember any moment when I was growing up when my parents told me, Patricia, this is how you respond to fear. We have been told that we should be happy, we should be okay, we shouldn't be afraid of anything. And whatever we're afraid of, we should control it. The challenge is that if we can step back, our mind is a content generator machine, which means that the mind is going blah, 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 yap, 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 chop, 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 chop. There is no stopping for our mind. 24 hours, 7 days a week, zero holidays. The mind keeps going on and on and on. But the mind is also a pattern making machine, which means that when it's creating content, it's also creating patterns of thinking, patterns of behaving, patterns of making sense what we're feeling and what we're sensing. We have been told that we can decide what we're afraid of. But I am here to tell you that we don't have control of what we get afraid of. We don't decide what we're afraid of. Fear happens, anxiety happens, and sometimes it can be adaptive. Like right now, in the middle of the pandemic, feeling scared and anxious is an adaptive response that is keeping us safe. The challenge with these messages is that sometimes people may have developed fear about being afraid, as if being scared is this bad thing, when in reality, all of us, we are wired to experience fear, anxiety, worries at any point in our life. So all these messages not only tell us to control our emotions and be happy, but also tell us that we should try to fix everything with the way we're thinking. But we don't have control of what our mind comes up with. The mind has a life in its own. It comes on and on and on. So within ACT, you're going to be invited hundreds of times to step back and watch what your mind does, watch what your mind says, and check whether you want to respond to that or not. So a very different message. Because of all these messages we have received, and because our mind keeps going on and on, creating a lot of content, and also creating patterns of thinking, one type of patterns that our mind has developed is what we call ruling thoughts. Have you guys heard about ruling thoughts or ruling behavior or anything like that? You may have heard things like, it will always be this way. Or you may have heard things like, all Latino people play soccer, right? So those are forms of ruling behaviors. And they are called ruling behaviors because once a thought pops up, we do exactly what the thought tells us to do. Do you guys relate to that? That when you think something, you do that particular thing. So when we think about this, how do these applies to worries and fears? I want to share with you some of these ruling thoughts that without realizing you may be hooked on. So here is one. Oops, there we go. Okay, so here is one ruling thought. I have to do something about this. If you think about the difficulties you may have had with fear, anxiety, and with worry, when you felt very anxious, didn't your mind tell you, okay, you have to solve this, you have to change that, you have to stop feeling like that? Do you guys relate to that? When we start hyperventilating because we're having a panic attack, what does our mind tell you? You have to fix it, do something. We have to stop the discomfort. And somehow we start doing all types of things, right? Like breathing through a paper bag, running away. Sometimes we start breathing actually faster. The challenge is that we think that we can stop what we are feeling or what we're sensing, but we can't. This idea of trying to problem solve our internal experiences actually makes it worse in the long term.